A cunning young black man named Samuel Johnson decided to marry a rich old woman with the intention of scamming her out of all her money. However, he underestimated the old woman and couldn't believe the life lesson she gave him. Samuel, a 23-year-old who always hated working, had been taken care of by his parents for a long time. But the couple realized that as long as they allowed their son to stay there, he would stay forever, so they forced him to find a job and move out. Under pressure, Samuel found a job at a cafe, where he was constantly late and routinely disrespectful to customers. Deep down, he was unhappy and hated his life because he loved buying expensive clothes and going to luxurious places. But he was always broke. Moreover, the young man didn't like spending the little money he earned. He usually made others pay for his bills and luxury expenses. Despite being physically attractive, it was rare for a woman to do this for him. Overall, Samuel led a monotonous life from home to work and work to home. However, everything changed thanks to an unexpected customer at his cafe. He was used to seeing people who worked every day, just grabbing their coffees and rushing to their next stop, ordinary people. But this customer was different. A luxury car parked in front of the place, and the chauffeur got out to open the back door, making way for an elderly woman with white hair, clearly showing her age. She was impeccably dressed and walked towards the cafe, waiting her turn. Samuel usually served customers without bothering to look at their faces, moving from one to the next. But this time, by chance, he looked up and came face to face with the old woman. Observing her attire and the security personnel accompanying her, Samuel immediately realized she was no ordinary customer. That's when his demeanor changed. A fake smile appeared on his face and he politely asked, "Hello, how can I assist you on this fine afternoon?" The woman simply ordered an espresso for herself and a tea for her chauffeur. Samuel personally brought their orders. The young man had never performed his job with such skill before. While delivering the hot drinks, he subtly flirted and impressed the woman. But he didn't stop there. "I can see that you're clearly a businesswoman. Could you give me a chance? I'm open to any role to advance my career. I feel like I'm limiting myself here," Samuel said, looking deeply into her eyes. The woman hadn't expected this while placing a simple coffee order, but she noticed he seemed dedicated and thought there was no harm in giving him a chance. She discreetly opened her purse, handed the young man a business card, and quickly left. The card had her name and business contact number, and realizing he had seized an opportunity, Samuel felt hopeful for the first time in years about the near future. The next morning, Samuel finally decided to call the number he had received. "Diana's office, how can I help you?" said the voice on the other side. The young man explained his story, and the secretary confirmed that she had already been informed and was expecting his call. A job interview was scheduled for the next day at 4 p.m. Samuel dedicated himself and arrived before the office even opened. He managed to catch Miss Diana's attention. She typically didn't handle interviews, but the young man was so persistent that she decided to make an exception. The truth was that she was fascinated by Samuel's communication skills and his immense focus on his goals. He was also well-dressed and appeared to be a true gentleman in any setting or situation. Diana had no doubt he would be hired and directed him to her office's sales department, where he would be responsible for going door-to-door selling products. The elderly woman was a perfect boss and managed one of the largest sports equipment sales networks in the country. Despite having no interest in sports and never intending to enter the business world, she took over the business about 13 years ago when her husband, who founded it, passed away and left the entire empire to her. Despite her lack of experience and amateur status, the company had never been better, and everyone thought the elderly woman had a natural talent. Samuel didn't know the details of the story, but he guessed by looking at old photos of Diana with a man who appeared to be the same age as her. He also noticed that the woman didn't wear a ring on her finger. So, he decided to seduce the elderly woman and make her fall in love with him. He thought she wouldn't live long due to her wrinkles and age, so he imagined marrying her and inheriting her vast fortune and conglomerate after a few years when she died. The young man didn't feel guilty for deceiving the sweet woman who had extended a helping hand to him. He didn't care about manipulating and lying to her for a few years, because in the end, a big reward awaited him. And all he cared about was status and money. The plan seemed to be working. The plan. Samuel had never been so dedicated. And despite having no work experience, he worked as a sales representative and managed to bring 2 major clients to the company, surprising everyone, even Diana, with his sweet and polite manners. The young man could manipulate everyone around him and get them to do what he wanted. The contracts he secured would bring a good profit for Diana, and as a reward, the elderly woman decided to take the young man to dinner at one of the city's best restaurants, encouraging him to continue his excellent work. At this dinner, the young man gave it his all. Samuel seduced the woman throughout the evening and complimented her, and the woman, captivated by the handsome young man's charm, reciprocated. They talked a lot during the meal. Samuel fabricated a story of hard work, and the woman shared the story of the company's founding and her adventures traveling the world with her late husband. A few weeks later, as they continued to go out occasionally and get to know each other better, the young man decided to take a risk and lay everything on the line. Samuel chose the right moment and proposed to his boss to be his lover. Diana's face was filled with astonishment and surprise. Even though they hung out regularly, he had always been very respectful. So this relationship request was quite unexpected. She tried to resist, saying it would be ridiculous for a boss to date an employee. But Samuel's strong persuasive skills finally got a yes out of her. The old woman was surprised that a young man would want to be with an older woman like her, but she was so happy that she didn't think too much about it. She accepted the offer and celebrated all night. From then on, Samuel knew his plan was going as planned, but the next part would require extreme sensitivity and care not to reveal his true intentions. He dedicated himself to the relationship, took her to places she didn't know, introduced her to new areas of the city, and deepened their relationship by exploring together. Tourist attractions and places Samuel had always wanted to visit but never had the money for. With the young man's love and care for the old woman, it was only a matter of time before she fell deeply in love with him. Experiencing new things and meeting incredible people while being with him made Diana feel more alive and rediscover the true meaning of living. Unintentionally, she remembered that her late husband had always prioritized work over family, and although he was always around, he was not a caring husband. To avoid future problems, he chose not to have children through IVF, leaving Diana alone without an heir. After her husband's death, the old woman became even lonelier and more withdrawn, dedicating herself solely to her work. Then, she decided to do something out of character and made an extravagant gesture she wasn't used to. She rented the best penthouse in the city for a weekend and invited Samuel without explaining the reason. The young man was surprised when he arrived at the hotel by helicopter, having never flown before and having no idea what awaited him. Diana was waiting for him, invited him in, and a few minutes later she made the most extraordinary decision of her life. She proposed to Samuel on the hotel balcony. The young man was stunned by the situation but immediately said yes, making Diana extremely happy with tears in her eyes. Samuel never expected his plan to work so well and for her to propose to him, but despite all the happiness, the woman noticed his rude behavior towards the hotel staff who greeted them at the door. She thought it was just her impression and that he wasn't actually rude, but it appeared as a red flag in her perception, causing her to pay more attention to Samuel's future actions. What she didn't actually notice, however, was the large amounts of money Samuel had been spending every week on unnecessary items since he started dating Diana. The man walked around wearing luxury brand clothes and watches that looked like jewelry. The young man acted and carried himself like a true millionaire. Adapting to the luxurious lifestyle wasn't hard for him. In fact, from the outside, one might think Samuel was born and raised in this way of life. All of this went unnoticed by the old woman because she didn't check her bank account or credit card statements daily. However, the bank manager noticed the unusual transactions and immediately called to verify and ensure everything was okay. Despite being very wealthy for decades, Diana was born poor in a small, humble village in her country. From the beginning, she was a hard worker and was the one who provided for the household while her husband tried to make his business successful. Since the company remained just a plan on paper for years, she continued to work and give part of her salary for him to invest in his dream, believing he would succeed with such determination, and he did. Years later, the company started to make a profit, and she stopped washing and ironing clothes for others, becoming the main shareholder. With her husband's tragic death, she became the sole owner of the entire empire. However, this whole journey of struggle made the old woman not care about the money she had. She only invested in her business and ignored all the houses, cars, and jewelry she could have had, limiting herself to basic comforts and only having what she needed. Extravagances like renting an expensive hotel and helicopter to pick up Samuel were extremely rare, even unique. Despite everything, their marriage was simple. There was no party or anything like that, just a small dinner at her home. However, the bank manager called to check if everything was okay and if these expensive purchases were made by her, as he had never seen so much money come out of her account. At this point, Diana also began to have doubts about her current husband's true intentions. She had already been suspicious of his long phone calls and spending money while sometimes not coming home for days. The old woman started to worry that her husband was only interested in her money. This situation consumed her from the inside, as she lived in fear of being cheated on for months. The old woman realized that marrying the young man was a mistake. To continue her life in peace and end her worries, Diana got the contact information of a private detective from a friend. The detective followed the man for a few weeks and took photos of his every day. When the modest woman received the final report from the detective, she couldn't believe her eyes. Due to Samuel's extraordinary abilities, he had been transferred to another branch of the company a few months ago to oversee other managers and employees. However, the truth was that he hadn't been going to work for weeks. When he left the old woman's house every day, saying he was going to work, he was actually meeting another woman and going to parties and restaurants almost every week. In short, he was constantly cheating on Diana and using her wealth and the company's corporate card to buy incredibly expensive gifts for his lover. The tears streaming down the old woman's face were the least concerning compared to the disappointment she felt from seeing the photos and bank transactions. Her trust was completely shattered. Trying to live again had resulted in a disaster, and she felt more used and deceived than ever before in her life. How could he do this to me? How can he say, "I love you" one moment and then go cheat on me with a young woman? She thought to herself, astonished at how blinded she had been by the passion and illusion of the naive and handsome young man. Despite all her sadness about moving on with her life, she knew this couldn't continue, and immediately started planning to take revenge on the selfish and deceitful Samuel, vowing that this wouldn't go unpunished. Her first move was to block all of Samuel's personal credit cards and remove him from the company. The first time he tried to use his card for dinner with his lover, the card was declined. Unable to believe the situation, he blamed the restaurant worker, saying it must be a machine error, and that such things always happen due to machine errors, then handed over another card. After 3 attempts, the atmosphere of embarrassment and tension prevailed. "This must be due to your incompetence, you know? If you worked at my company, you'd be on the street today," Samuel said to the humble and friendly waiter. The waiter apologized and said he would be right back. When he returned, he brought the restaurant manager and asked if the man could pay in cash because his cards were clearly having issues. The young man tried to call his wife Diana, but she didn't answer the phone at all, leaving him in that situation. Under the threat of the police being called and the risk of spending the night in jail, Samuel left his documents and cell phone with the manager and promised to come back the next day to pay the bill, to avoid further embarrassment in the crowded restaurant. The manager agreed. The man was furious, not understanding what was happening, but in his mind, he still believed his plan was working perfectly and going exactly as he wanted. So he tried to handle the situation as best he could. On his way home, he asked his wife why this had happened and about the unanswered calls. The woman said she didn't know, that it was probably a bank issue, and that she would call and fix it the next day. Samuel tried to hide the situation, but couldn't contain his anger. At that moment, Diana could see the young man for who he truly was, without the spell she had placed on him. She saw what he valued and wouldn't let all his lies and betrayals go unpunished. The next day, she really went to the bank, but not to fix the credit card issue, but to change her will and inheritance. Since she had no children and her family was already deceased, everyone always wondered what would happen to all her money and businesses. This information was kept secret between the woman, her lawyer, and the bank manager. Unfortunately, her revenge plan was cut short by her sudden death. Only a few close employees knew, but Diana had been battling cancer for about 3 years, knowing her days were numbered amidst the recoveries and relapses. The old woman, betrayed by the last person she trusted, passed away sadly. But knowing she was close to saying a final goodbye, she left a letter with her loyal driver containing her last farewell and final duties. After his wife's death, Samuel began to act like a grieving widower, wearing an expensive black suit and sunglasses to hide his tears. The will was read during the funeral as Diana requested in her letter. The venue was filled with company employees and shareholders worried about the future of the woman's business. The text began by thanking everyone for attending and creating a disturbing atmosphere, by expressing that she had found true happiness in the other world, by meeting her late husband again and that they could be together forever. While everyone was looking at Samuel, the lawyer mentioned that the company would be equally divided among all the current shareholders. She expressed that the elderly woman had always seen their help, and thanks to the good guidance and decisions of the board of directors, Her company had become stronger than ever as she passed to the other world. In this way, she trusted they would do a great job. Regarding her wealth, the amounts in her accounts turned out to be much more than everyone had thought. Although people believed in her innocence and lack of knowledge, it turned out she was an enormous investor who had made incredible profits for years and had earned from the shares and sales of other companies she helped establish. However, all this money would go to the establishment of a non-profit organization that would provide shelter for street children. This organization would cover their place to stay, food, and clothes until they were 18, provide education at prestigious universities, and guarantee a position in one of her companies. The look of hatred and anger on Samuel's face reappeared, just like the day before. Not getting any share of the company or wealth drove him crazy. He was waiting for the fate of the properties and cars, which were much more than he could ever spend for the rest of his life. However, it turned out that all of these would be sold, and the proceeds would be donated to existing charities. When the will finally came to Samuel, the late Diana clearly stated the importance of the man in her final days. She expressed that thanks to him, she had experienced incredible and extraordinary things, seen beautiful places, and made contact with things and people she was not even aware of. For that, she was grateful. Diana stated that she was leaving him the most important item she could, believing it had made him very happy. Samuel was given a key to a safe deposit box in the country's most renowned bank. A sly smile appeared on Samuel's face. He thought he would finally own a jewelry collection or property deeds. All the guests applauded as a final tribute to Diana, probably thinking Samuel had received the biggest portion of the inheritance. Days passed, and with the sale of the properties and cars, Samuel finally decided to go to the bank to check the inheritance he had been waiting for so long. He was well received by the manager, who said everyone had been expecting his arrival. The young man was taken to the safest floor of the place, and as a security measure, the employees left him alone in the room, asking him to call them when he was ready. His great anxiety made Samuel open the steel box as quickly as possible, expecting diamonds and other jewels. However, when he saw what was inside, he nearly collapsed. Inside the safe was the espresso cup Samuel had served Diana on the day they met. The drink, now cold, and a simple note were inside. "I hope you enjoy the bitter taste. Love, your dead wife." The young man instantly understood the message. She knew his plan, she had always known. It was a mockery showing Samuel that he had gained nothing for all his lies and betrayals. As a result, he was left with only a cup of black coffee and a great disappointment. Samuel was back to square one, penniless and jobless. He was devastated, crying with no idea what to do. Everyone had understood his game, and after the shame he caused in the city, he never managed to achieve the social rise he wanted. Even the cafe he worked at didn't want him back. Diana died happy, knowing she had found her soulmate beforehand, her late husband. Samuel, on the other hand, ended up as an opportunist who didn't get what he wanted. If you liked this story, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and the story on the screen will probably move you as well. Enjoy watching and see you in the next video.